Move to the next section, which is a Q&A section, which will be handled by Barrister Clement. Go down also here. The Clement is the senior partner of a prestigious law firm, Osuya & Osuya, an internationally acclaimed lawyer, arbitrator, policy and regulatory consultant with a specialization in corporate and commercial law, consumer law, and litigation. Barrister Clement has advised clients on international cooperation, commercial and investment law in several countries across Africa, Asia, Europe, and America. We'll be taking on this section of Chief Kayode Aderemi. Welcome, Barrister Clement. We are glad to have you. Please, the floor is yours.
Kayode Aderemi is a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria with 14 years practice experience. Shortly after he bagged his LLB Honors degree in law at the university and a BL at the Nigerian Law School, he trained and was certified as a corporate mediator and arbitrator. Kayode Aderemi has featured on various panels of discussion on issues bordering on energy, environmental protection, land use, and incidental matters. He serves as the current chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association, NBA, Ogun State House of Assembly Committee. Since 2018 to date, Kayode Aderemi has been consistently representing the Nigerian Bar Association at the stakeholders meeting when memorandum for bills and are presented at the Ogun State House of Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Mr. Aderemi to this great lecture for today, and the questions that will come forth, and I hope that the participants will be able to appreciate the questions and the responses that will come from Mr. Kayode Aderemi. Mr. Kayode, thank you so much for your time and patience.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
What is the legal framework that are in place to ensure that the environmental assessment for the Lagos-Calabar highway project are thoroughly conducted and adhered to?
Yeah, thank you. So quickly, there is a law called Land Use Act in Nigeria. That law covers all states in the country. And the essence of the law is to ensure that owners of lands to be acquired by the government are compensated. All right. Like I said, it's called the Land Use Act. So that's the legal framework guiding land acquisition. Of course, the topic I'm given is related to the Lagos-Calabar highway project. For those of us that are Nigerians, we know that's supposed to be a project spanning through many states, across the country. So what the government would do is to have recourse to the law that I've cited, which is the Land Use Act, and ensure that the procedures for land acquisition is met or observed before those lands are acquired or taken from the traditional or customary owners. So yes, there's legal framework already, and it is the law is called the Land Use Act. Thank you
so much for giving us a very educative response to that question. So the next question is, can you discuss the mechanism for public engagement and stakeholders' participation in the planning and execution of this highway project? Of course, you know that it has generated a lot of controversy both within the private sphere and the public sphere about the processes. So this question, or one of the questions that is going to come forward, will help us have a more comprehensive understanding about what the government is doing and whether they have followed the proper way in doing this. So the question again is, can you discuss the mechanism for public engagement and stakeholders' participation in the planning and execution of this highway project?
All right, so this second question is very much related to the first question. So the procedure to follow actually is to engage with the host community. The lands on which this highway rail project will be done are owned by other individuals or families or communities. All right, so the way to go by them is to serve them notices, approach them, all right, intimating them of the plan of the government to have this done, all right, not just happening into their land. The law also, that same Land Use Act, as cited earlier, also contains other provisions. For example, payment of compensation for those, for instance, that have crops or economic trees, or even forests. Since we are talking about environment today, the law says, or the law entitles them to a certain amount to be paid as compensation. All right. For those paying rent on the land, for instance, the government has to pay them rent too. All right. So the idea is not just to displace persons. I was listening to the debate of the students from Ajayi Crowther University and University of Ibadan, and some of them actually spoke into this. Some was of the view that housing should be prioritized over planting of trees, etc., etc. All right. But the way it is done is when such things are to be done by the government, like land acquisition, compensation must be paid. As a matter of fact, the law is that where compensation is not paid, then that acquisition shall be void. What that means is that the government would not be able to validly acquire that land from the owners. So if the land belongs to a community, for example, the law says that the government should, interface with the communal leaders to ensure that they assess what is payable and ensure that same is paid. So there are a lot of legal frameworks on ground to ensure that those that traditionally own, that land or those lands are paid. I've said, you can see that in sections. I don't want to bore us with the sections, but 28, 29, etc. of the land I cited, the Land Use Act is there. So they have to be engaged and paid accordingly.
All right, thank you so much. We're gradually dissecting the questions, and we are getting the expected answers. Thank you so much, Mr. Kayode Aderemi, or rather Chief. I hope the traditional title will not make me to kill goat for not giving you the proper inscription. The next question again, Chief Kayode, is what are the anticipated challenges in balancing economic development with environmental sustainability in the Lagos-Calabar Highway project? This goes beyond law. This is also talking about the reality that we have to face. So what are the anticipated challenges in balancing economic development with environmental sustainability in the Lagos-Calabar Highway project? The economic benefits, is it commensurate to the environmental sustainability?
Yes, well, absolutely. Again, listening to the debates of those two students from the various universities, they've mentioned some parts of this too. In the long run, it would be really, it's not a short-term project, or ROI, return on investment, so to speak. But, for those of us on this symposium that are not Nigerians, there are some states, some areas in Nigeria categorized or called Niger Delta states, right? They are part of the states of the Federation. One of them is Rivers State. In Rivers State, there's a place called Ogoniland. All right. A long time ago, oil was discovered in this place called Ogoniland, right? And then shortly afterwards, there was oil exploration. And everything seemed fine. Then we had the likes of Shell and other multinational oil companies coming for dredging and exploration. Everything was fine until a few years later when the ecosystem was kind of impeded. There was a problem, right? There were oil spills. Lawyers would know what I'm talking about, maybe even all Nigerians. That's what made Ogoni so popular in Nigeria. And then people started agitation, and that is what will happen, really. People of Ogoniland felt that they were not having the economic benefits for what the government was taking from their land and what the likes of Shell and other oil multinationals were taking from the land. Of course, as expected, revolt started and then sabotage followed. All right. So, but people need to understand there is a place of what I call grand orientation. The government has to really confer with the people, all right, to ensure that they understand the essence of what is being done. Of course, recently we had cases of persons who came pilfering some railway lines in Nigeria because they do not understand that if those lines are there, like the coastal highway we're talking about here, eventually it will generate a lot of economic rise for them. But if there is no proper orientation, as time goes on, the host or local communities will begin to not see reasons with what the government is saying. They won't see the bigger picture. As far as they are concerned, you have taken their lands, you've constructed a highway on it, and there's nothing to benefit. Remember, there will be noises from the hooting of the sound of the whatever that will be running on the highway or the railways, and etc. etc. So people will start fighting back. So there is a need to really go down to the host communities, make them see the short and long-term benefits of these things. So with that, things can be better. So yes, there are economic benefits.
All right, thank you so much. The next question would be how, considering the legal system that we have in Nigeria, our judicial process, how long it takes to address issues. You go to court, can span as long as 10 years from the High Court up to Supreme Court, even more. So
Yes.
the question again is, how will the legal system address any potential dispute or conflict that arise during the implementation of this project? Because haven't heard from the government, although if it is existing, we are not aware. How will the people who are peasant farmers be able to address this legal imbalance if they feel that their right has been violated and the government is not doing anything about it? And all of the conflict that may arise, it could not be only the acquisition of land, could be as a result of anything that could happen, and which could be the conflict or dispute. How are they going to address these potential issues?
Well, there has to be what I call local content, agreement in the agreement that the government will reach with the host communities. All right. And there is something called ADR. While my profile was being read, mediation and arbitration was mentioned. So the idea of that is to ensure that ADR simply means alternatives to dispute resolution. That is, before approaching the courts, there are alternatives that litigants can explore. One of them is settlement, for example, or conciliation. So parties can meet and discuss, their interest, or whoever feels slighted or shortchanged. All right. So going to court, of course, should be the last resort. Litigation takes a lot of time for reasons known and the likes, right? So what can be done, for instance, is to put in the agreement, insert what I call the ADR clause. And what that means is that where parties are aggrieved or where persons feel shortchanged, the first thing to do is to call a meeting of stakeholders and begin to assess, what grievances one person has or does not have, right? And this is where the place of continuous monitoring comes in. One of the professors that spoke earlier talked about monitoring, of policies. That's so important. Like the case of Ogoniland that I cited, the leader of the movement was later assassinated. That's Ken Saro-Wiwa. All right. And as we speak, there are still agitations in Rivers State. So the way to go by it is to understand that there may be even the professor that spoke last, I quite enjoyed his presentation, talked about some unintended consequences or something like that when he talked about some snails and the likes. All right. So there would be, shortfalls. There will be contingencies. There will be things that were not even thought about or planned before. So there has to be a close follow-up so that as time goes on, where the host communities are having some agitations or some things that are complaining about, there has to be an ADR session, where parties and stakeholders will meet to discuss differences and what issues are. If that is not done, the whole process can be sabotaged. Like, of course, we had cases of, bombing of pipelines in Niger Delta states and the likes. We have the Avengers too, they came up later. All right, so we will begin to have agitations, and it could even lead to full-blown terrorism if care is not taken. So it could be counterproductive. All right. So the way to assuage the feelings of the farmers that feel disenchanted and the likes is to have ADR meetings, have closed door sessions with all stakeholders to ensure that all concerns are heard and taken care of. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. But looking at this issue of ADRO, that there should be ADRO clause, and the host communities are not party to this agreement. That is being the project, they are not party to it. So I don't you think that the government could also come up with a special purpose legislation that would resolve disputes of this kind, because it's passing through other states, about 6 or even 9 or 10 states that the road will go through.
States.
Issues of conflict of law and all of that. So don't you think that it is proper for the government to come up with a special legislation that will have more strength than just an agreement?
Yeah, absolutely. No stone should be left unturned. Remember, when the Ogoni people and other Niger Delta states indigenes started raising eyebrows and complaints, at some point, the government was not listening to them. But then it started with peaceful protest. After a while, we began to have property destruction, even deaths resulted. So that has taught us a lesson so that we will not fail from scratch. Before the government embarks on this, it's so important, like I've said, to ensure that no stone is left unturned. So if it warrants having like a joint, interstate agreement to ensuring that those, investments or infrastructure to be built along those coastal lines are secured, then it's important. Like I said, no stone ought to be left, unturned. So that's quite a fantastic one. Member states can be put together, maybe through their governors, to ensure that that is in place. Yes.
All right, thank you so much. So we have a few more questions, but it is important. A lot of lawyers are here, a lot of scholars are listening, and all of these responses will guide them in approaching issues whenever it arises, as long as they are connected to it or they can be in an advisory capacity. So now, the next question is, are there specific provisions or compensation planned for communities that might be adversely affected by the construction of the highway, irrespective of the provisions of the Land Use Act or any other legislation regarding compensation plan? Is there a clear budget for estimated budget by the government regarding compensation plan? Is there any feasibility compensation budget for this road construction?
Yeah, so two things basically and quickly. We just have to first refer to, although you have set aside the Land Use Act, but that is the first port of call. And that's important because if persons whose lands are taken or communities want to vent their grievances, they have to vent it based on existing laws. All right. So the first thing they'll look at is what I've called the Land Use Act. And sections 28 and 29 actually itemizes what they can do. All right. For those that have buildings, what they will get, for instance, will be more than those that have just bare lands. All right. And for those that have crops, it's different too. But there will be an assessment. There is something called the Land Allocation Committee. All right. That is the committee that will meet with the host communities to actually assess, whatever will be pulled down. Again, back to the debate had earlier today. Government does not just happen on people's lands like that. Notices will be served. It will be gazetted. That is published, in the government newspaper, so to speak. Steps must be taken, and notice of acquisition too will be served, and then compensation paid to the families that own that land. The flip side to this that can be done again is what we call the quota system. All right, where a certain investment is brought to an area, a local area, usually there are some unwritten agreements, which is to the effect that persons in that area will be entitled to be employed. Take, for instance, if there is the need for a service station or security personnel to man some stop points for the coastal line. All right, the quota system will ensure that indigenes of that place, resident there, would be forced, to benefit from such. Like I said, those are unwritten agreements, but they are actually applied.
All right,
so
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Just the last question, which is very fundamental. Nigeria is a very cultural country, and we are so passionate about our culture and our historical sites. This last question goes to the effect that what are the processes put in place to handle or relocate community gods, community worship centers, even if the land use are made provisions for compensation. So what are they going to do regarding, are there life cases of this nature, and how can the government deal with it? If you are going to pass a road through where people worship their gods and historical sites, what are the things that have been put in place to relocate all these places?
This is where the host communities would have to engage professionals, all right, like lawyers, like geologists, and etc., for them to assess the situation. The government may not be aware, for example, that you have a god you are worshiping or serving along that coastal line, all right? So it is the job of this community, through their professionals, to approach the government to sensitize them and let them know that so and so things are in so and so places, all right? But if that is not done, the government can't be all-knowing, all right? So for those who are representing such coastal lines listening to this symposium, it's important for you to engage, professionals so that they know how to table your concerns. Of course, these are relics. These are things that you would want to keep, for historical or knowledge sake or for future sake, or like a museum or something. So, but government wouldn't know, they won't know those things. And that's where agitations begin from. So consult those who are professionals and ensure that they liaise with the government to see how to relocate these monuments or these relics you have, so that there would not be clashes or cross purposes. Yes, thank you.
Okay, Chief Kayode Aderemi, thank you so much for doing, as lawyers would say, thank you so much for doing justice to the topic. We appreciate you. We thank Green Institute for this work. And Dr. Adenike, thank you so much for this privilege to hear from professionals. So we hope that the end of this program will be very fruitful. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. Thank you, Barrister Clement Osuya. Thank you, Chief Aderemi, for all the wonderful insights.